Hi all, welcome back to the Model Haven. It's actually been a few months since my last update. I had mentioned in my last video that I was going to be going in for surgery, and I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end of this video. But basically, one surgery turned into 3 surgeries, and the recovery was a little more intense than I was expecting. And I fell behind with work, and so I had to catch up with that and some other hobbies. So unfortunately, I just haven't had time to work on models until recently. And I've started making some progress on the Camaro again, so I thought it'd be a good time to do a quick update. But before we do that, I did want to mention 2 things. One is that I did get one more shop card in. This is from Larry over at Ace Hot Rods. So thanks, Larry. He actually sent that in a few months ago, but I'm just getting to it now. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that last Christmas my wife did get me a Pash starter airbrush set along with the compressor and a few other accessories. So I'm really looking forward to using that. I'm probably not going to use it on this build. I want to stick with the enamel-based paints that I'd already started using, but I probably will use it on the next one, and I may also make a video about setting it up and getting used to using it. But for now, let's head to the bench and we can take a look at where we are with the Camaro. Alright, so basically I just recently picked up from where I had left off a few months ago, which was basically I had the engine done and not much else. So now we've got the engine and transmission mounted in the chassis, and we've got the wheels on. We've got the exhaust and the rear suspension, and I may actually I'll probably try to weather the bottom of this. This metallic silver, I think it actually looks pretty good in real life because it looks like metal, but it's a little bright, and I think if we weather it, it'll look a little bit more realistic. But that stuff all went together fairly well. So as you can see, we've got the engine and transmission there. We've got our radiator, fan shroud, the battery, and the hoses, and various other things. So basically with that, you know, so there was a lot of flat black and a lot of gloss black. I'm using the Testors enamels, and the enamels in general, the biggest issue I've run into is just that they take a long time to dry. So you know, if you start handling them too soon, you get fingerprints, and then you got to touch things up, and then it gets a little sloppy. But that being said, the flat black is actually fairly forgiving. So if you need to touch it up, you can do so, and sometimes it's even hard to tell that you've touched things up. I haven't had nearly as good luck with the gloss black. I just haven't really got the handle of so when I spray those parts, it's hard to get a complete coverage, but then not to overdo it and get the paint on too thick. So I think I just need probably more practice with that. That may get a little easier when I move to the airbrush, but I do want to be able to use cans and get a little better at getting that on. But I was able to touch it up and get it to the point where it doesn't look too bad. Getting the hoses and everything installed in there was a little tricky and took some time, but it all kind of came together. This Revell kit is everything fits together pretty well. So if you just do a little sanding and fit the things, do a test fit before you paint, it's all come together pretty well for the most part. Now there are lots of little blemishes and things in here. It's not perfect, but it's not too bad. And most of the places where there's blemishes are going to be covered up anyway. You won't be able to see them. So for the wheels, so we have these the wheels that came with it are these, you know, GM Rally style with the Derby style hubcaps on them. And for those, I actually used this Tamiya acrylic black paint. So just painted them up and then went over them with some acrylic thinner, and that actually worked out pretty well. I'm actually they're not perfect, but I'm pretty happy with the way that the wheels turned out. They look pretty realistic, and so for the slots where there would normally be holes in those wheels, I couldn't get it quite dark enough just with the black wash. So for those, I was just able to fit in one of these Sharpie ultrafine markers and fill in those parts, and that really helped out a lot, made it look more realistic. But yeah, I actually really like that style wheel. I think it's, you know, mostly a nostalgia thing, but when I was a kid growing up, they were all over the place. You know, I remember when my grandma actually got a new 73 Malibu, and it had those wheels on it. And the funny thing about my grandma is that of all the adults I knew when I was growing up, she had kind of a lead foot. So, you know, both my parents worked, so we spent a lot of time over there. And if she'd take us to the mall or something, you know, we'd really fly. And so, you know, as a kid, that was kind of fun. But also, one of my uncles was still living with my grandparents then, and he had bought a new 73 Monte Carlo, and it also had this style wheel. So I just remember hanging out. If I was hanging out there on the weekend, and you know, just I remember sitting Indian style in the driveway and just kind of looking at these wheels and thinking that they were really kind of cool and futuristic looking. And now, of course, they're retro, but I do think they're pretty cool. So that's pretty much it. I got a few little things I've got to touch up, especially on the back with the exhaust. I think I am actually going to go back and use a pin vise and try to hollow those out a little bit. Probably should have done that before I assembled everything together, but I think it'll look a little better when I do that. And then so the next step is going to be to work on the interior. So the interior tub actually has a you probably can't see it on camera, but it actually has a pretty nice texture down here. So I think I could just paint that, and it'll look sort of like carpet. And because the car itself is going to be orange, I'm going to go with a white interior. But I think I'll have to do some research on what's correct. But I think that even with a white interior, it would have black carpets, a black dash, a few other black parts, and then, you know, the white vinyl seats and the white on the side cards on the doors and all that kind of stuff. And so I'll be working on that next. And I don't know if I have it handy here, but I did look a little at the dashboard, and it is really it's really tiny. So I don't know if I'm going to be able, what I'm going to do about painting that, but it'll be kind of an adventure. I might end up just you know, inserting something in there rather than trying to paint it, but we'll see as I go, and that'll probably be what'll be in the next update. And then once we get the interior together, then I'll continue work on the body. And you know, my first attempt at spraying the body and doing some wet sanding didn't really work out, so so I've stripped it, and I'm gonna try to paint it again. And so you may see a little bit of that in the next video. Probably that'll be the video after that. We'll be working on getting the body together. But yeah, that's all I really have for this update. It's a pretty short update. But I did want to mention, so I said at the beginning I'd tell you a little bit about my surgeries, and you know, I'd sort of debated whether to you know, include that in my videos, but it seems like cancer awareness is a pretty big thing in the model community, so it just seemed like probably the best thing is just to put it out there. So it's a long story, but I'll try to make it as short as possible. Basically, about a year and a half ago, I discovered kind of a lump under the skin on my back, kind of my upper back near my shoulder. And went and had it looked at, and a doctor said, well, it looks like it's just a lipoma. It's no big deal. You know, maybe we can remove it if it bothers you at some point, but we'll just leave it alone. And so I didn't, you know, I just kind of forgot about it. And then a few months went by, and my wife noticed that all of a sudden it was starting to grow really fast and get big. So went back to have it looked at. This time they're like, no, it's definitely not a lipoma. They did a biopsy, and then it came back as a type of a spindle cell sarcoma. So at this point, you know, we were really pretty worried, and I went and had a PET scan. But actually, I was very, very lucky that even though I'd had it for a while, and even though it was malignant, it hadn't spread anywhere else in my body. So that was really lucky. And so at the time I was with an HMO, and they referred me, my primary care referred me to a surgeon who's kind of a general surgeon who also did cancer type stuff. And so once we knew what it was, that we scheduled a surgery, and they removed it. And what I didn't know is that they weren't actually going to cover it over with a skin graft right away. They wanted to send the whole thing to the Mayo Clinic and get it analyzed before they did a skin graft, just because if it's, depending on exactly what type of sarcoma, they might have to take out more stuff. So so I had to wear this kind of like wound vac for a week, which covered over it, and I had to carry around this little device. And so it came back, and they said well, that the margins were clear, so they could go ahead and do the skin graft, which they did. And you know, up to then, those two surgeries were intense, but they weren't that bad. And you know, they had to remove a little bit of muscle from my back, which messed with my right arm, but it wasn't too bad. And so I started recovering for that. But then they referred me to an oncologist, which, you know, I probably should have gone to the oncologist in the first place rather than directly to a surgeon. They took a look at the results that had come back from the Mayo Clinic, and you know, even though the margins were clear for the type of sarcoma I had, it was just that they weren't nearly wide enough, especially the deep margins. So the way these things grow is they put out little microscopic spindles, and they were like, you know, it's almost guaranteed to come back if we don't go back in and do more surgery. So then I had a third surgery. This time they referred me to a specialist in sarcoma down at Baylor in Houston, and they were able to do a single surgery, so they took a bunch more out of my back. The specialist did that, and then another surgeon, a plastic surgeon, did the skin graft, and they were able to do it at the same time, which was nice. So I was in the hospital for about 5 days, and then got out. And so that whole thing was a lot more intense because they removed a lot of muscle, and then when you remove that much, you know, get down to bone, and you cover it with something. So they basically do a muscle flap where they take muscles from your lower back and move them to cover up what they've removed before they do the skin graft. And so that really kind of screwed up my arm and my back, but it's been getting a lot better, you know, especially these last couple months. So I still have somewhat limited mobility in my arm, but it's you know, eventually I won't get everything back, but it'll be fairly normal. A little bit of weakness, but not too bad. But you know, in general, I'm just happy that we caught it before it spread, because well, any kind of malignant cancer, you guys know, it's bad news if it spreads. Especially this one, because this particular type of sarcoma I had doesn't really respond to chemotherapy. So if it moves somewhere and it's not somewhere that they can either surgically remove it or use radiation, then you know, it's not a great situation. So even though it kind of sucked going through all this stuff in general, I'm just really happy that we got it in time. It didn't spread, so I'll be seeing an oncologist soon, and I think they're going to do another PET scan soon. But for the moment, I'm just getting back with my life. Everything's moving forward. And, you know, the main reason I'm putting it out there is just because, you know, Sarcomas are pretty rare, but if any of you guys ever encounter something similar, you find a lump like in your arms, legs, back, and you definitely obviously want to have it looked at, and if somebody tells you it's a lipoma, you know, they're probably right. Lipomas are super common. Sarcomas are pretty rare, but no matter anything like that, you got to push to get a biopsy because you want to know absolutely for sure what it is, because if it's something bad, you need to take care of it, you know, as soon as possible. So, but that's basically it for that. So let's just get back on track with the models. So I'm going to try to have another update soon. We'll take a look at the interior, and hopefully I'll be able to keep trucking and keep putting out videos. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks. Bye-bye.